Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jane Fillion. I run the press shop for the First 5 Years Fund. Thank you so much to everyone for joining our Childcare and Early Learning Appropriations webinar today. We are so thrilled to have you all here, and I'm so excited to hear from all of our speakers. So, as you may know, Congress is making decisions about critical funding for childcare and early learning programs which support families with young kids. So today you're going to hear from our wonderful panelists of experts about what's at stake, what all of this means, and what all of us can do today to help. So we're going to be hearing from Sarah Rubenfield at the First 5 Years Fund, Bob Bisson at National Head Start Association, Daniel Haynes at NACI, and N. Hedgepeth at the Child Care Aware of America. So I am going to turn it over now to Sarah Rubenfield for a state of play.
Thanks so much, Jane. And thanks so much to our partners at NACI, National Head Start Association, and Child Care Aware of America for co-hosting today's webinar with us. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your incredibly busy day to join us and learn more about what you can do to help ensure Congress protects and prioritizes federal funding for childcare and early learning this year. As Jane mentioned, I'm Sarah Rubenfield, Managing Director of Government Affairs at the First 5 Years Fund, also known as FFYF. And I'm excited to join you all today to talk about the federal appropriations process. So first, you might be wondering, what exactly is appropriations? Well, as some of you may know, Congress holds the power of the purse, meaning Congress is in charge of determining funding for every single federal program each year through a process known as appropriations. Funding for federal programs that have to do with things like housing, energy, how much we spend on defense, education, and of course, early learning and childcare. Now, Congress does this by producing 12 separate appropriations or funding bills, with each of the 12 bills covering a different area, like veterans or housing or defense, and with childcare and early learning funded through the Labor, Health, and Human Services Education and Related Agencies Bill, often known as Labor H. Labor H bill includes funding for our core federal early learning and childcare programs, including the Child Care Development Block Grant, which provides funding to every single state to subsidize childcare for lower income families, Head Start and Early Head Start, which provides early learning, nutrition, medical care, and family services for children and families with the most need, Preschool Development Grants, birth through 5, which provide funding to states for data, infrastructure, and ensuring more efficient coordination among programs, as well as other programs like IDA Part B and C for infants and toddlers and C Campus. So you might be wondering, how does this process work? Well, the first step is for the president to present his budget to Congress, outlining his priorities for spending for the year. As some of you may know, just recently, President Trump shared a skinny budget with Congress, which did not eliminate funding for Head Start as previously reported, but it did, however, eliminate funding for preschool development grants and C Campus. Did not include specific numbers for Head Start or CCDBG, but we do expect to see the full details of the budget later this month. And so once Congress receives the president's budget, then they typically get to work on starting the appropriations process for the year. So this entails members of Congress highlighting their priorities for the year's funding bills by signing on to what are known as Dear Colleague letters. Now, these letters often say things like they support robust funding for Head Start or CCDBG, or they support a specific level of funding for programs, such as at least $12.4 billion for CCDBG, which matches what we in the early learning community are asking for. And these letters are incredibly important because they show what the priorities are for members of Congress more broadly. Now, the more members supporting funding for a particular program, hopefully the better the program does in the overall funding package. That's because the Appropriations Committee, the committee in charge of writing these funding bills, takes these letters into consideration as they are putting together the funding bill for the entire year. So once the letters are finalized, appropriators decide program by program how much funding each one will get, which again is why it's so important to show lots of support for our programs. Appropriators then put funding for all of the bills into a bill that Congress must vote on. Now, Congress has to pass the appropriations funding bills and get them signed by the president before September 30th each year. Congress doesn't pass a funding bill by September 30th, the government can shut down, as many of you've probably heard over the years. So this process is incredibly important because it's one of the only things Congress has to do each year. And we all know that Congress often doesn't act unless they have to. So this year, we're pleased to see a number of Dear Colleague letters in support of our core federal early learning and care programs circulating, showing support for all the programs that we care about, such as CCDBG, Head Start and Early Head Start, Preschool Development Grants Birth through 5, C Campus, and IDEI. Now, we'll talk a little bit more later on about how you can help make sure your members of Congress sign on to these important letters. But first, let's go ahead and dive into each of the programs a little bit more. I'll turn it back to you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So now we're going to hear from Daniel from NACY, excuse me, who's going to talk about the Child Care and Development Block Grant. Daniel, I'll give it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jane, and thanks, Sarah, for that great overview of the appropriations process. I get the pleasure of talking about the Child Care Development Block Grant, which is one of the most critical programs that supports access to quality early childhood education for families with young children across the country. The way CCDBG works as a federal block grant is that Congress, through the annual appropriations process, allocates funding for the program that is then sent to the states, where they get to spend money in a large variety of ways, largely related to providing subsidies for families to help offset the cost of childcare. States have a lot of leeway over how this funding is spent and how it works. They can set rules related to which families are able to access funding. They can set rules to how that funding is provided to programs, and they can set rules around how much money those vouchers are worth, which encourages more providers to participate in the subsidized system and serve these families that have access to subsidies. At the federal level, there are some kind of broad overarching standards, programs that receive funding through the Child Care Development Block Grant, whether they're a family child care home, a small center, a large center, a faith-based program, have to meet some basic health and safety standards and be licensed, registered, or regulated with the state. Families, if they're going to access funding, have to have incomes below 85% of the median income in the state. So it serves largely families who have low to moderate incomes, although many states at current funding levels set their eligibility levels lower than that federal funding level. And funding for this program is particularly important because, again, as more funding is given to the states, it allows them to make more progress in advancing better access to high quality childcare. Some states are investing directly in the workforce using CCDBG funds. Some are investing in supply of quality care for children who need access to care or who have particularly low access to care, like infants and toddlers and children with disabilities. So we really are excited about the ability of funding for this program to continue to support these state innovations. And we've seen some really important progress in recent years that we want to see continue. I think the best thing about CCDBG appropriations is I get to talk about real wins that we've seen over the last decade. In fiscal year 2015, CCDBG was funded about $2.4 billion a year. We've since seen that program's funding increase to about $8.8 billion a year from the federal government to the states. And this is largely due to the bipartisan commitment that we've seen from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to advance funding for this program. Unfortunately, the program is still not funded at the level it needs to be to serve all children that need access to quality childcare. At current levels, the program is only able to serve fewer than 15% of eligible children who need access to quality childcare. So there's still a lot of room to grow. But we do know that for the families that do receive funding through CCDBG, the program makes a huge difference. And Jane, I think I skipped that last slide if you want to flip back. Family copayments range across states. Some states have no copayment for families. Some states limit copayments for families with low incomes. But on average, copayments for families with CCDBG are about $10 a month, which is pretty low compared to what most families pay for childcare. Without CCDBG, and I think Child Care Aware just put out some really great new data about this, the cost of childcare is a significant burden for many families. And for many families that do benefit from the program, without access to that subsidy, they would not be able to access the quality childcare that they need to go to work and for that their children need to thrive. So we're excited about the work that many members of Congress, again, are doing to champion this program. In particular, we want to give a huge shout out to Representative Suzanne Bonamici on the House side, and Representative Burgess Owens also on the House side, who have long championed these programs and lifted up the importance of these programs through their Dear Colleague letters. And then on the Senate side as well, we're so excited that Senator Tina Smith is continuing to lead a letter supporting CCDBG alongside a broad range of programs. We know that with that bipartisan support, we're going to hopefully continue to see progress and growth in this program. We're going to get more children served. We're going to provide higher quality service through the program. Reimbursement rates are going to continue to go up. Payment practices are going to continue to improve, and we're going to continue to build on the progress we've seen. So I get to talk about the fun positives today, and I believe I am passing it to you again, Jane, to go back to Bob.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. That was great. And now we're going to pass it over to Bob to talk about Head Start. Bob, all you.
Thanks, Jane. Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Beeson from NHSA. Just everything that Daniel said, but just delete CCDBG and insert Head Start. We've got bipartisan sponsors, we've got bipartisan supporters, but we don't have enough funding to get done what we're trying to do. But let me go into a little bit more. Head Start provides services to pregnant women and to children birth through age 5 who come from families that are living at or below the poverty line, are experiencing homelessness, or children who are in foster care. It is a unique program in that it is funded by the Department of Health and Human Services through a grant program that goes directly to community-based, faith-based, for-profit, nonprofit entities within a specific community. The individual programs apply for the grants, are awarded the grants, and the funding goes directly to these programs without passing through state capitals, which makes Head Start a very unique program among the types of programs that the federal government funds. It is also unique in that when Head Start was established 60 years ago and then codified into law, it requires parents to be a very direct partner in everything that is done in each Head Start program, working with the program leaders to build out the curriculum and determine what type of curriculum they want to use, to figure out the proper way of spending funds so that each individual program meets the unique local needs of the kids, their families, and the communities in which they serve. And when we talk about the communities in which they serve, Head Start is literally everywhere. There are over 17,700 individual Head Start centers that at least one of which is located in every congressional district across the country. So there isn't a member of Congress in the House or the Senate who can say that that doesn't apply to my congressional district. It is they just can't. It's there, it's everywhere. We do have, as I didn't mean to joke about it, but I did. It's the same as what Daniel was talking about. We have been very graciously funded by Congress on a bipartisan basis year over year. Some years the increase in funds is more than others. The last couple of years it's been pretty de minimis. The issue is that only about 26% of the kids that are eligible for Head Start and only about 13% of the kids who are eligible for early Head Start are currently in the program and getting services. So there is a huge, huge unmet need that is out there right now. And Head Start is not just an education program. It provides kids with, in addition to their early learning, it provides them with nutritional support, with medical, dental, behavioral, vision, and services. It provides parents with job training services. It does a lot of fabulous things that we call wraparound services, that we call comprehensive model, et cetera. But it is something that really does with operates with the goal of helping break intergenerational poverty. There are about 40 million kids and their families who have benefited from Head Start over the past 60 years. This coming Sunday is Head Start's 60th birthday. Happy birthday in advance. Thank you, LBJ. There are about 750,000 kids that are currently enrolled in the program. And like I said before, we are in every single congressional district. FFYF just came out of the field a couple of weeks ago with a fabulous poll, which shows the support for Head Start is really across the political spectrum. 73% of Republicans, 86% of Democrats are in support of the program overall. That's tremendous. You can't get a whole lot better than that when you start talking about 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 when you're going to the Hill and asking for support. Our ask is twofold this year in terms of an appropriations request for Head Start. Number one, it is to reject any attempts to weaken or eliminate the program. We were gravely concerned when an initial budget leaked out, I don't know, a month or so ago. We survived the president's initial, what they call skinny budget that came out a little over a week ago. And we're hoping that we will see funding in the full budget when it comes out, as Sarah said, later this month or early next. We are asking for nearly an additional $2 billion for a total of just shy of $15 billion for the program. But our single biggest priority is a COLA for the staff that lead and run this incredible program of 3.2%. They didn't get a COLA last year. They didn't get a COLA this year. They got a very small COLA the year before. So that's what we are asking for there. And I want to build on something that Daniel said as well. We are very grateful to have tremendous support on the Hill on both sides of the aisle. Representative Pete Stauber is leading our appropriations letter among the House Republicans. And Jahana Hayes, who is one of a small handful of members of Congress who actually attended Head Start as a kid, is leading it on the Democrat side. So back over to you, Jane. Thanks so much. I look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thanks, Bob. That's so great. And now we're going to turn it over to Anne with Childcare Aware, who's going to talk to us about the PDGB5 program.
Great. Thanks, Jane. I'm Ann Hedgepeth. I head up Childcare Aware of America's policy and research team, and I'm so glad to be here today to dig in on the need to fight for federal childcare and early learning funding for fiscal year 26. You've heard about CCDBG, you've heard about Head Start, a few other of the programs that we are fighting for. I'm going to spend some time today talking about the Preschool Development Grant B5, or PDG. So on the next slide, I want to start by talking about a quick refresher on what PDG is and how it helps states support the childcare system, which in turn helps parents find the quality and affordable childcare that they need when and if they need it. PDG is administered at the Department of Health and Human Services in partnership or jointly with the U.S. Department of Education. And competitive grants are provided to states who do several different things with their funding. They develop strategic plans for where they want to go with their childcare and early learning system. They invest in program quality and improve child health and development. They maximize parent engagement and knowledge, and they prepare kids to enter kindergarten ready to succeed, in part by linking up our K-12 and our childcare and early learning systems. There are two different kinds of PDG grants that are awarded: one-year planning grants and 3-year renewal grants. And what is core to PDG, and I think what you can see on this slide, and that makes it unique in the childcare and early learning funding ecosystem, is that it is really designed to be used to build bridges between childcare and early learning programs and funding streams in states. As this slide reminds us, states are braiding and blending a host of different childcare funding streams. And in addition, they may also be managing state-funded pre-K or preschool programs and even some local or regional initiatives. The childcare and early learning system is stronger when the various agencies and departments all work together, when data systems are interoperable, and when states have a plan for how all of these component parts will function in unison with each other. And importantly, PDG funding means that states do not have to reduce direct support for families and providers in other programs in order to build these connections and synergies. PDG funding makes that possible. So I'm not going to touch on all of the ways that PDG fundings have been used by states, but I did want to uplift some examples from states specifically who were implementing projects in 2023. You can see a whole list of types of projects on the screen here, but I wanted to touch on a few of the topics that you see listed. And the first one is I wanted to mention how states are promoting parental choice and engagement using their PDG funds. In 2023, 22 states used PDGB5 funds to support families around their childcare choices. This included states investing in designated navigators or coordinators to facilitate childcare referrals, like in Maine and Virginia. They built better information platforms, including ones with a no wrong door or single stop approach to ensure that families are directed to the right program from any point of access, like in Michigan. And improvements to eligibility screeners were created that bring together information about childcare scholarships, preschool, and Head Start and Early Head Start, like in Texas. We also saw a number of states invest in their childcare workforce in 2023 using their PDG dollars. 23 states used these funds for workforce initiatives, and some states really focused on their childcare and early learning workforce in 2023 with PDG funds. When states use PDG funds for workforce, they often think about increasing compensation or offering professional development opportunities. And we saw that year that some states piloted new programs, including apprenticeships and access to affordable health care for the workforce, like in New Jersey and Louisiana. And others did things like provide wage supplements, like in South Carolina, Vermont, and Rhode Island. Finally, I wanted to mention the way in which PDG funds often go to support better and stronger data systems. And better data systems really help us make policy decisions, allocate resources, and improve our childcare system. So it's a win when we can strengthen the way our data systems work. A number of states do use PDG funds for early childhood data improvements, and we've seen that in places like Nebraska, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Wyoming, PDG funds contributed to the development or improvement of an early childhood integrated data system. And in places like Idaho, we've seen PDG funds go to ECE workforce data collection, which allowed for professional development tracking and financial incentives for providers. So it's a good thing to have these systems-focused funds available for states and for that work to not take away from the critical investments that CCDBG, Head Start, and other programs make in childcare. So we have a couple of asks we want to make sure that Congress hears from us. I want to underscore something that Sarah said earlier, which is that while the president's skinny budget does propose the elimination of PDG funding, and looks like other ECE fundings are not increased, so we are looking at a net loss here, Congress gets to decide. So it is ultimately vital that we make clear to Congress that they should stand up for PDGB5 and they should reject any attempts to eliminate or to weaken this important program. We really do need robust funding to strengthen this program and to strengthen our childcare system overall. And that goes hand in hand with our CCDBG, Head Start, IDEA, and C-Campus funding streams, all of which work together to improve the childcare and early learning system for parents and childcare providers. So with that, I will hand it back to Jane.
Thank you, Anne. That's such a helpful summary of everything. And now, Sarah, I'm going to hand it back to you just to talk about what it is that we can do now.
Great. Thanks so much, Jane. So as I mentioned earlier, there are several letters circulating right now that we need as many members of Congress to sign on to and show their support for our core federal early learning and care programs that my colleagues just outlined. Again, signing on to these letters is the best way members of Congress can show their support for these critical programs. And that's because, again, appropriators, the members of Congress writing the funding bills, take into account how many members sign these letters as a way to measure support for the programs. So first, let's start with the Republican letters. These are letters led by Republicans and signed by Republicans. And, since Republicans are in charge of the House, Senate, and White House currently, these letters are more important than ever. First, we have a letter led by Congressman Burgess Owens, as Daniel mentioned, from Utah, in support of robust funding for CCDBG. And members have until Friday, May 16th to sign on to this letter before it's finalized. Next, we have a letter led by Congressman Pete Stauber from Minnesota in support of robust funding for Head Start and Early Head Start. Again, members have until May 19th to sign on to this letter before it's finalized. And again, both Head Start and CCDBG weren't included in the president's skinny budget, which is good because they weren't eliminated in the budget. But it is still incredibly important for members of Congress to show support for these programs, to make sure we have robust and hopefully increased funding. And they can do that by signing on to these letters. And then finally, we have a bipartisan letter in support of the preschool development grants, birth through 5, which Anne highlighted for us. Which again was eliminated in the president's budget. So again, it's incredibly important to have your member of Congress sign this letter. We are also very fortunate to have a number of letters led by Democrats as well. And those are typically signed by Democrats, asking for specific funding amounts for the various programs. So as you can see here on this slide, we have a letter on CCDBG and IDEA led by Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici from Oregon. We have a Head Start and Early Head Start letter led by Congresswoman Johanna Hayes of Connecticut. We have a C Campus letter led by Congressman Bill Foster of Illinois and Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. And finally, we have a CCDBG, Head Start, IDEA, and PDG Birth through 5 letter led by Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. So now, here is what we need each of you to do today. So as you can see on this slide, you can scan the QR code on the screen and ask your member right now to sign on to these letters. So you can see if you scan the left QR code, if your member of Congress is a Republican, and that will take you to the Republican specific letters to have them sign them. On the right side, you can scan the QR code if your member of Congress is a Democrat. You can also go to our website at ffyf.org/takeaction to walk you through the steps and help you figure out who your member is. And with just a couple of clicks, you can tell your member of Congress to sign these letters today. And again, these letters are closing this Friday, so we need each of you to do this today. After that, next, we need all of you to tell your friends, your networks, your coworkers, your followers on social media, and ask them to contact their members of Congress as well. It can be as simple as join me in supporting childcare and early learning for children and families with this link. And it's important to spread the word. Finally, you'll see on the last slide, we encourage you to invite your member of Congress to come and see childcare and early learning in action. On this next slide, you'll see here is a list of upcoming breaks or recesses, as they call them, for Congress, when members of Congress will be back home in their districts and states throughout the summer, starting with next week. They'll also be back home the entire month of August. And members of Congress love talking to constituents when they're home, but they love taking photos with cute kids even more. So please invite them for a tour or a roundtable with providers and parents. It's a great way to remind members of Congress how important federal funding is for childcare and early learning, and how you can ensure your member of Congress becomes a champion for our programs. So thank you so much, everyone, again, for taking the time today and joining us in encouraging members to stand up and prioritize early learning and childcare through the appropriations process. And now I'll turn it back to you, Jane, for questions.
Great. Thank you all so much. That was such a helpful overview. And now I'm just going to go to the questions and sort through a couple of them. And thank you all. I know some of you sent in some before. They were really great. So the first one is, will we get access to this recording post the webinar and access to all the slides? And I think I can answer for Sarah and say, yes, we will be following up with those, and we'll be following up with the action as well. So if you didn't get the chance to scan the QR code, that is totally fine. You'll get that from us. And then I have one that says, it is my understanding that Head Start funding is not in danger to be eliminated. Is that not true? Daniel, or I'm sorry, Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'm happy to. Like I said earlier, we survived the initial threat that was when the president's budget, his skinny budget came out on the 2nd of May and did not call for the elimination of Head Start. However, we have not seen his final budget, and as Sarah mentioned at the very beginning, Congress has the power of the purse. And the Republicans, who are still looking for cuts in many places in the budget, control both the House and the Senate. So we need to make sure that we can influence as many individual members as possible to get them to sign on to these letters and to pledge that they will not cut Head Start. So no, the threat has not gone away to Head Start or any of the programs that we have discussed here this afternoon.
That's great. Thank you. And then this is a great question. Sarah, you talked a little bit about emailing your members to invite them to see local sites. Can you give some advice on how to do that? Is it better to email their Washington office or their district office?
So I think it's fair to say that you can always email both offices. It's fine to put the request in both places. You will likely be dealing with the district staff, so it's really great to get to know them in general and to introduce yourself and send the request there, knowing that you have these dates when you know members of Congress will be home. So you really want to include some key details like where you're located, how many families you serve, and, you know, of course, highlighting some of the great federal resources you receive. But I think it's such a great way to help members of Congress really see this federal funding in action and see the impact that it has for children and families, to continue to keep them engaged as a champion for childcare and early learning.
That's great. Thank you. And then I see that we've gotten a couple questions about in-home childcare. Daniel, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I saw a bunch of questions come up in the chat and want to iterate that across a lot of these programs and particularly talking about CCDBG right now. In-home childcare remains and is an option. When funding is increased for programs like CCDBG, funding is being increased for programs of all types. When I talk about childcare subsidies going to parents as the primary way that CCDBG funding is spent, that means that for this program, parents actually have a lot of choice, maximal choice in where funding is directed. As long as that program is licensed, registered, regulated by the state, whether it's an in-home setting, a faith-based setting, a large center, a small center, even relative. Parents can use that funding to support access to childcare that meets their needs and the needs of their children. So when we're talking about increasing funding for CCDBG, we're really talking about maximizing parent choice. And Bob, I think there are a few questions as well about how family childcare programs participate and Head Start. And I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on some of that as well.
I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm going to be completely honest with you on that. Head Start is done. There are home visit programs that Head Start operates where Head Start folks come in and visit what is being done in-house and help the providers and things like that. Does that answer the question that was in the chat? I'm sorry. I didn't see these specific questions. I wasn't looking. I apologize.
Oh, good. Paying attention to what you're saying, I feel like is probably important. I also just flagged the family childcare option in Head Start, and that some programs do support
Yep.
Services in family childcare homes as well as in centers.
Perfect.
Thank you both. And then I saw one that said, can you list the amount of funding requested for each? And we will follow up with that as well and with the letters as well. And then, Anne, I am going to direct this question to you. What happens next if the White House budget doesn't call for the funding that these programs need?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind that we have a number of steps ahead of us. And I think Sarah's initial slide really helped show that the White House gets to make this ask or have a wish list of their own, but ultimately Congress will make a decision as they write these individual appropriations bills. That also means both the House and the Senate will spend time talking about this. These letters from members of Congress are critically important, and when members of Congress say, we think these programs matter and we'd like to see their funding increase, that can really carry far more weight than a wish list from the White House. And it really shapes the decisions that appropriators make in the next few weeks about the bills that they draft. There's a lot that's going to be on the table, but your voices as constituents and your members of Congress weighing in about the importance of all of these programs can make a big difference, especially as we're already hearing members of Congress say that they're looking forward to putting together their own appropriations bills, even after they take into consideration what the White House has suggested. So it's a critical time to reach out. And I want to, also stress that all of the different ways that we shared are really important. So you can weigh in about the letters, you can make these asks, you can share it with your network, and you can think about getting to know your members of Congress better during recess. All of those things would make a big difference as we fight for this funding.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to give this question to anyone who likes to answer it or who would like to answer it. You all work closely with members of Congress and their staff. So what's more helpful in this situation, calling members or emailing them from about the letters from one of the action sites that we sent around?
I'd say do both, Jane, but I really appreciate that you all have packaged things so well, and that one-click access that FFYF has provided through those QR codes is a great place to start. But if you get a chance, pick up the phone and then make a call or share it on social, like Sarah suggested. Every little piece counts. They take account of those letters and those email requests that come in. They make a note of any of the phone calls they get. And certainly the more that you can build a relationship over the long term makes a difference. So one step at a time. You can start with making those digital asks, but if you have a minute and can make a phone call, I encourage you to do that as well.
Jane, I would also add that one other thing to keep in mind is that offices are hearing about a whole host of issues. Everything that the federal government touches, housing, veterans, defense, you name it. And so it is perfect. It is actually terrific if they hear about childcare and early learning more than one way, because it's really hard to kind of break through the volume of issues that they often hear about. So I think the bottom line is not to hesitate or be shy, and it's great for them to hear multiple times. The other thing is, I think a number of people are asking how they can find out if their members of Congress have already signed on to one of the letters. Again, I think it's important to reach out to your members and encourage them to sign on regardless, so that they hear that there are a number of folks in their district that want them to prioritize these programs. And if they've already signed, they'll let you know, and then you can say thanks. But I think that it's a very short window. The lists are changing every day, so it's really important just to reach out and encourage them. And the worst that happens is they say we've already done it, and you can say great, and then you can thank them. So.
And then as the person who's not only asking the questions, but also helps run the press shop, I also want to put in a plug for letters to the editor, which is a great way for folks to get something in front of their member of Congress. I think you all have my email from the registration. I can help you with that. That's when you write into your local paper, talking about how you support funding for these programs, and you can mention your member of Congress by name in our follow-up. And once again, if you'd like to email me about getting one of those, I'm happy to help with that. And then I think we have time for one more, and this I think can be for all of you. So I know that there's a lot going on in this current political climate. Do you think that there is meaningful support for these programs in Congress?
I can start there. And this also kind of ties into some of the questions about where some of the numbers come from on the asks. The ask for CCDBG this year is $12.5 billion, and that reflects a bipartisan commitment that both Republicans and Democrats have identified as a real target for where we can shoot. It represents a doubling of funding from several years ago, and we have made good progress towards getting there because of that bipartisan support. Appropriations bills don't happen in Congress on a single party line. It takes a give and take, and it takes compromise, and these are areas where we've seen that compromise arise the most, even in really tight budget cycles. So my friends on this call know I'm not particularly an optimistic person, but this is one area where I do like to say I'm glad that Congress controls the power of the purse, because on appropriations, and specifically appropriations related to child care and early learning programs, we have seen that bipartisan support, and we continue to see members from both parties champion these programs.
Great. And is there anything that anyone else would like to add? And if not, I think this has been so helpful. Great. Well, thank you, team. And thank you so much to everyone who joined. We're so lucky to have such an incredible group of advocates. And then look out for an email from us. I think it should be tomorrow, with all this information, the Action Center, and everything else that you all asked about. And thank you so much. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.